Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, the Bills may be on a bye week, but we certainly are not. We'll be breaking down the AFC playoff picture, taking a look at how the Bills should approach the remaining 5 games, and despite Dave probably not wanting to, taking a little bit of a sneak peek ahead to the 2024 offseason. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are the Bills guys, and this show is presented by Picasso's Pizza and the Cover One Sports Network. We're going to get right into it this evening, Dave. We got a couple of super chats from Justin Tyndall. So we're going to get right into these super chats here. He's coming in hot this evening here. His first super chat says, so sick to death of Josh going toe-to-toe with elite teams, playing his ass off, only to have McDermott's D wilt under pressure to go along with this pathetic time management and use of timeouts. And I'll tell you what, like, on the surface, I totally agree with that anger. And I made a comment on social media last night. I was like, because Patrick Mahomes got the ball with the chance to go down and score to tie the game. And I'm like, man, why does it always feel like the defense is letting Josh Allen down and Patrick Mahomes is always getting a ball with a chance to win it? And man, social media let me have it. Because I was like, listen, guys, like, I'm not doing any research. When's the last time Josh Allen had the ball and a chance to win? It always seems like it's the defense. And people were like, dumbass, it was last week. He had a chance to win the game in overtime and he didn't do it. And there are a number of occasions where Josh Allen's had the ball. The Jets game, he had the ball in overtime. The Buffalo Bills offense went 3 and out. He had the ball a number of times. Tampa Bay a couple of seasons ago. The Tennessee game where he was stopped at the goal line. So I feel like there are a number of instances where Josh Allen has the ball at the end of a game with a chance to win as well. But I think a lot of the things that do stick out in our minds are, Josh Allen leading the Bills down to take the lead, and then the worst offense in the football, the New England Patriots, marching down the field and scoring on us. Josh Allen giving the Bills the lead, and the Buffalo Bills putting 12 men on the field and allowing a kick, right? Like the Buffalo Bill, Josh Allen leading a field goal drive, and then the Buffalo Bills just completely wilting under pressure and letting the Philadelphia Eagles walk down the field. So there are a number of occasions this year where I feel like that's happened. And as fans, we want to rep QB1, but I think it's maybe a little bit more balanced than maybe this super chat would suggest.
I think it's a little more balanced, but I think that we are so concentrated right now on this year, and we are so kind of hyper aware of the situation the Bills find themselves in right now, being 6-6, and we're going to talk about this tonight, and like on the outside of the playoff picture looking in, that these times this year where we've really needed the defense, let's say, to step up against teams, the Eagles aside, where we are going against offenses at the time that really, have been pretty bad, right? I mean, the Patriots have only scored 30 combined points in their last 3 games, right? And they scored 29 points against the Bills. So I think that's part of the issue is like the opponent as well, right? In these situations. And so, yeah, it's been frustrating. I think
49ers shut the Eagles down, right? Like,
49ers shut the Eagles down. And then you think about the losses the Bills have stacked this year in these situations. Week 1 against the Jets, obviously, most recently against like the Pats and teams like that, and the Broncos. And to think about, they could have, not easily, but they could have lost both the Giants and the Tampa Bay game this year as well. So, there are situations where the defense, even in wins this year, has kind of wilted down the stretch, notably in the Giants and Tampa Bay game, the Bills skirted losses there and still able to come away with wins. So I think it's a matter of just the situation in the most immediate, recency. So I get where he's coming from for sure.
Justin Tindall coming in as well with another super chat saying, Josh and Steph need to talk to Pagula. Bean has spent his entire tenure building the D-line, draft and free agency. Where the hell are they at the end of the game? And we're going to have these discussions tonight too, because the Buffalo Bills are probably going to have to redo their defensive line again. I think the defensive line has been pretty good this year, like second in the NFL in sacks. But with guys like Daquan Jones on IR, guys like Von Miller less than a year removed or just over a year removed from a major injury at his age, it's not a surprise that maybe the Buffalo Bills defensive line is not showing up in some key moments. But I think the Buffalo Bills defensive line has actually been a positive this year for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the line has been good. You talk about signing guys like Leonard Floyd. I think guys like AJ Epinesa, for me, who have played above expectation. Like I said before the season that I didn't really have any expectation for AJ Epinesa. Any sort of continued ascension from the play we got last year was a bonus, and he's been great, right? And so I feel like, Judge will be back in just a second. I feel like the defensive line maybe gets a little bit of a bad rap because Von Miller hasn't come on. We've had the injuries to Daquan Jones, and I can understand that. But I do think by and large, the defensive line has been pretty good. And in a year where there have been a lot of blame to go around, I think you can point more to individual plays and maybe some individual players than you can as a unit as a whole, right? So, for example, like Jordan Phillips making some boneheaded plays, penalties, things like that. You can point to moments like that as points of frustration, but I do think as a whole, the defensive line, considering the injuries, when you think about on the whole, Oliver's play, Epinesa's play, Floyd's play has been okay, has been pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So on to tonight's topics, right? So if the Bills beat the Chiefs this Sunday, they will have moved to 7-6, and the Chiefs will fall to 8-5. That means that only one game will separate these two teams. It's crazy how things can and really could swing in the NFL in such a hurry.
Yeah. This is one of those situations where somehow the Bills could find themselves one game behind the Chiefs. The Chiefs last night lose to the Packers, a road loss for them, a non-conference loss, so not as maybe debilitating as a conference loss, but still a loss nonetheless. And just really goes to show how things can change quickly. The problem I think the Bills have now is that they've really put themselves in a situation for very little room for error, right? The Chiefs, although 8-4 after the loss, even if they do lose to the Bills, would still be 8-5. They have a little bit of wiggle room, right? Whereas the Bills really, they don't have a ton of wiggle room. And so this game, obviously the Bills, the last two regular seasons before this one have gone into Arrowhead and won. So there's some precedent there. The Chiefs haven't necessarily been playing their best football, at least offensively this year from what we've seen from them in the past. And to be fair, their defense has really maybe carried the load for them a bit more this year, which in a way is a little bit scary to think about, that the Chiefs potentially have better offensive football ahead of them with their defense playing so well. But the Bills have a real opportunity right here coming out of the bye. Obviously, the sting of the Eagles loss has kind of carried into the bye, but that sting can go away slightly if the Bills come out on the road and beat the Chiefs here coming up this next week. So look, a lot of things as well yesterday across the NFL, outside of the Titans, kind of blowing it against the Colts,
Mhm.
did kind of fall the Bills' way, right? You have the Broncos losing, and we really kind of need the Broncos to continue to lose so the Bills can move ahead of them in the loss column. And then you have teams like the Steelers and Browns also losing. Now those teams have maybe an easier schedule ahead than the Bills do, but at the end of the day, the Bills still only find themselves one game out of 3 teams ahead of them that are 7 and 5. So, and 2 of those teams are in a playoff spot right now. So all hope is not lost, but the Bills have very little room for error.
Yeah, no, hopefully my connection is better now. I just switched computers because this MacBook
It is better now. Yeah,
giving me nothing
it
but
is
troubles the last couple of weeks. So my apologies for the wonky first 10 or so minutes. But yeah, looking at the Buffalo Bills playoff odds and sort of the AFC landscape as you were, I mean, the Dolphins are 9-3, the Ravens are 9-3, the Jaguars are 8-3, and currently playing probably going to be the Bengals because the Bengals don't have a real quarterback. The Chiefs are 8-4, and then the wild card spot right now are the Steelers, who don't have a quarterback, the Browns, who don't have a quarterback, and the Colts, who are kind of the Colts, who are all sitting at 7-5. None of those teams, in my opinion, are very good. The Browns have a good defense, but as a whole, not a very good football team. And then Houston sitting at 7-5, the Bills and the Broncos are 6-6. If you really look at it, the Bills probably have to go 4-1 over the next 5 games, with their loss preferably being an NFC loss to the Dallas Cowboys to get in. And in that scenario, they would really need a little bit of help. So in all reality, I think 5-0, I think would be the most confident people could be in for the Buffalo Bills to reach the full season. And that's a tall task.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tall task. And as many have pointed out, the Bills have been pretty wildly inconsistent this year from week to week, right? Then what can give you or anyone the confidence that they can reel off 5 straight? Obviously, there's some precedent from years past that the Bills have been able to go on runs late in seasons in years past. So that's really probably what you can point to. And you can point to potentially the fact that the Bills offense the last 2 weeks before the bye had really looked like it picked up some consistency and some more deliberate execution and intent here with Joe Brady at the helm. So there is some hope there, but the Bills do have a task ahead, right? I mean, they have the Chiefs, they have the Cowboys. The Chargers are going to be no pushover. We know the Chargers have had their own issues in closing out games, and then you still have Miami down the stretch in the last game of the year. So a lot of very good teams on the schedule ahead of the Bills and other teams like the Colts, Texans, Steelers, Browns. Maybe the schedule not as difficult for them. So I know a couple of those teams do play each other, obviously, but the Bills are going to probably need to go 4-1, 5-0, and if they do go 4-1, 5-0, maybe they don't need as much help. Anything less than that, they're going to need help.
And I'll tell you what, anyone who knows me knows I am the eternal optimist, and I'm looking at the schedule here, and the Dolphins' last 3 games. The Dolphins are sitting at 9-3 right now. They have a cakewalk of a schedule. I mean, they've played no one of substance really this year. When they have played teams of substance this year, they've just gotten destroyed outside of keeping it tight with Kansas City. But the Dolphins' last 3 games of the season are at home versus Dallas, at the Ravens, at home versus the Bills. They have not beaten a team over 500 since they beat the Buffalo Bills in week 3 of last year. That means if that trend continues and the Miami Dolphins lose the last 3 games of the season, even if they win their next 2 cakewalk games, that only puts them at 11-6. If the Buffalo Bills run the table, including defeating the Miami Dolphins on the last week of the season, that would put the Buffalo Bills at 11-6. So as long as the Buffalo Bills start winning again and beat the Chiefs and keep winning, to me, I'll be keeping a sliver of AFC East hope alive, at least until the Miami Dolphins can prove that they can beat a winning football team, or the Buffalo Bills lose another game.
I mean, that's the thing that I was just talking about, right? The room for error is slim. Miami has to feel good that they could go 3-2, maybe potentially even 2-3, and still come out ahead in the AFC East. So for me, I'm kind of putting the AFC East hope a little bit to the side for my own personal take, and just kind of really putting just my playoff hat and hope on, because I do think that if the Bills do get hot and they do end up making the playoffs, in order for the Bills to make the playoffs, they are going to have to come into the postseason playing well, because that would mean they probably most likely won 4 of their last 5, or potentially their last 5 games in a row, which means that the Bills will be playing, you don't win 5 games in a row, most likely not playing really good football against that schedule. So that would lead me to believe that the Bills will be playing good football heading into the postseason. And in that particular case, not too worried about whether it's a division crown or not. A home game would be great, but at this point, I'm really just kind of get in the dance, and then we'll see what happens.
Any final thoughts on sort of the AFC landscape before we move on to some other topics this evening?
Well, I will say this, right? I do think that to me, teams like the Steelers and Browns, I would imagine those teams have a pretty good chance of dropping off, right? I mean, the Steelers have been winning this year in spite of their really bad offense. Now they potentially don't have Kenny Pickett, although it doesn't really matter. I would question that. And the same for the Browns. In a way, these Browns and Steelers are kind of mirror images of each other, right? Like, quarterback situation murky, offense, maybe the Browns have a better offensive line and a better running game, but like, offense is a big question for both teams. Both defenses have been playing pretty well. And then the Texans and Broncos are teams that, to me, if they can kind of stay where they are, they're going to be tough teams to kind of knock away. Broncos maybe finding a groove. I know they just lost to the Texans, but the Colts, to me, are the team that you look at and they're probably the least the most surprising team that's in the playoff mix right now. But every time you want to write them off, they just seem to find a way to win a game. So it'll be really interesting to me. I think the Bills really need to hope that the Browns and Steelers, to me, are the 2 teams that really need to drop off for them.
If only the NFL playoffs were determined by a committee, I think the Buffalo Bills would have a chance to be placed into the playoffs over the Colts and Gardner Minshew and the Steelers with their offensive situation, and the Browns on their 4th string quarterback, 39-year-old Joe Flacco. All right, before we get into some other topics this evening, a quick word from the guys over at the Cover One Buffalo podcast.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right. The next conversation, not an easy one to have, but over the bye week, the Buffalo Bills found themselves in the middle of yet some more drama as Von Miller found himself in an unfortunate circumstance. He was arrested in Dallas, Texas on charges of domestic violence against his pregnant girlfriend. Some of the evidence has been leaked online and it does not look great. However, his girlfriend is also at the same time now sort of denying that any assault ever occurred. It's clearly a messed up situation. I think both of us were going to decline really to comment too much on the logistics of the situation, much like the Buffalo Bills will likely this week decline to comment on the logistics of the situation until the legal system plays its way out and we have all of the sort of evidence in front of us. But I think the one thing I will say in regards to the Von Miller situation, where if it were up to me, if I was Brandon Beane, if I was Sean McDermott at this point in the season, especially with the way he's playing, I would probably just tell Von Miller to stay at home and make him an inactive until this situation resolves itself, because one way or the other. What are your thoughts on this situation?
It's a compounding of multiple bad situations making up one really bad situation for the organization, right? So obviously, yes, as Bill Czar Electric says, still an active case. It's a mess. You have like conflicting, I'll call it evidence, right, between what we've heard in the phone calls versus what is being stated now. The whole situation obviously still has a lot of layers to play out, which for the Bills in this season, like it does sort of make sense to me, like just from that perspective and from his play on the field, like probably doesn't need to be active, right, for the foreseeable
Yeah.
future. Now, beyond 2023, I don't know, right, because there's still a lot of things that have to play out, like you mentioned in sort of what's happening right now. There's a lot of question as to whether or not the Bills can get out of this contract. There's some verbiage in there around the conduct policy, right? The personal conduct policy. But now with some of the recent developments in the case, we don't know what's going to happen, right? So to me, I think if you're thinking about this situation just from a 2023 perspective right now, like I don't see any reason to activate him at this point. You have this going on, and not to and not to mention the play on the field is it's just not there. So I have no problem if you're the Bills right now and you inactivate Von Miller, honestly, for even the rest of the year, right? Because I doubt there's going to be clarity in time in the situation where the Bills potentially make the playoffs. So, and Pop says, why isn't the league put him on the league list? I think they are waiting for the situation to play out as well, right? I think it's too early.
The Bills were off this week too. Like, so that's another situation where I think we'll get a lot of clarity on the situation tomorrow when the Buffalo Bills start to address the media again. Obviously, the media is going to have a lot of questions for the Bills regarding what they know, what they don't know, whether they did their homework on Von Miller before they signed him, because, they didn't do their homework on Matt Araiza before they drafted him. And Von Miller had some things in his past when he was signed as well. So asking the Bills about their process and their due diligence when it comes to vetting some of these guys is definitely some scrutiny the Bills will face tomorrow, as well as like just what their plans are with Von Miller. So we're both in agreement. And I think the comment section is in agreement too. The short term, you really don't need this distraction when you're in a playoff race. You really don't need this distraction when he's not delivering on the field. He's accused of doing some awful things. You don't want to put him on the football field if those things are in fact accurate and true and did happen. So I think it would be best for the Buffalo Bills, even if he doesn't get put on some league list, to simply make him inactive, ask him to stay away, and to sort of just move on with guys like Leonard Floyd, AJ Epinesa, Shaq Lawson, Gregory Rousseau, and Kingsley Jonathan. Do you think the Buffalo Bills would do that too? Because I don't know. Like, Von Miller hasn't been very good when he's been on the football field, right? And now the last couple of weeks, even people like Joe Marino are questioning whether he's out there, like, even putting forth his best effort. And the Buffalo Bills seem to continuously, week after week, still trot him out there, sort of giving in to what Von wants. Do you see the Buffalo Bills sort of standing up to maybe Von, who, if Von's like, hey, I'm not on a list, I'm going to show up, I want to be here, do the Bills stand up to him and make him inactive and refuse to put him on the football field?
Yeah, this to me is a really interesting dilemma, right? Because in one way, you have the actual football element of this, which is like the game day inactive or active list, right? And his contribution on the field has not been great. I mean, you look back past several games, it's been like, 15-ish snaps a game he's playing, and like they haven't been impactful, right? They haven't been impactful snaps. And then on the other hand, you have the organizational stance on what to do with him. And you wonder if, like, this now becomes like a meeting of the minds between Terry Pagula, Brandon Beane, and Sean McDermott on what to do with this situation. And ultimately, the game day active inactive list, as we know from past, past conversations that Brandon Beane's had with the media and such, that's a Sean McDermott. Those are Sean McDermott type decisions that are made. So, is that going to be a Sean McDermott decision, or is that going to be an organizational decision? I think that given this circumstance, this might be a situation where this needs to be like a joint decision from the three men at the top here in the Bills organization, so that there's like a unified front on what to do with Von Miller come game day. I expect, as RJ kind of says in the comments, I expect him to be inactive this week, but I don't know beyond this week if he will be inactive. But again, who knows, right? They may trot him out there again and say, maybe we need you in this Kansas City game, and we're going to need you to close the, but the play on the field's not there. So I think I don't know. I guess the question I would pose back is, does it create more headlines for your organization if he's inactive or active this game? I think it's a no-win situation if you're the Bills right now, right?
Yeah, 100%. Looking at it long term, to me there are three scenarios that could play out here long term with Von Miller and his status in the Buffalo Bills. Number one is, the legal system plays out. Vaughn is found not guilty, but there's a lot of evidence that shows that maybe he is, and he got away with it because of his money, et cetera, et cetera. The NFL can't really do anything about it, and they don't suspend him, so the Bills can't void the guaranteed money, and the Bills find themselves in an awkward and uncomfortable position. And if they found themselves in that awkward and uncomfortable position, and they make the decision to release him without any of the protections of his guarantees being voided, the Buffalo Bills have one of two decisions that they'll have to make. The 2024 dead cap would be $32 million, $32.5 million. And the Buffalo Bills would save negative $8.5 million. I don't really think that is a realistic scenario for the Buffalo Bills should they decide to move on from Von Miller, even if the NFL does not suspend him. His post June 1st release, if you want to designate him post June 1st, it's going to be a dead cap hit of $17 million in 2024 and $15 million almost $15.5 million in 2025. Not an ideal scenario. I think the Buffalo Bills, before this situation played out, their long-term vision with Von Miller, their long-term plan with Von Miller was that 2 years removed from his injury, that he would start playing more something along the lines of how Leonard Floyd is playing right now. I think the Buffalo Bills were banking on, or are banking on, if they keep Von Miller long-term, maybe the situation settles itself out in a different scenario. Who knows what happens? I think the Buffalo Bills are just crossing their fingers long-term and thinking to themselves like, hey, we can't afford Leonard Floyd next year now because he played himself out. We probably can't afford AJ Epinesa, man. Well, let's just hope Von Miller gets back to like somewhat of his old form, and he can play out till we can get to 2025 and release him with a little bit more cushion. That's probably the long-term plan with Von Miller if the Buffalo Bills can't get out of that contract, because that's really all you can do at this point is just hope. If, again, this whole situation resolves itself and Von Miller finds his way back onto the football field for the Buffalo Bills, that is probably the Bills' long-term plan is just to cross their fingers and hope.
Yeah, and it's not a great plan, right? Because you're potentially losing out on two guys Leonard Floyd having a career year and AJ Epinesa on the ascent as a younger player. Also, both of those guys can play at this stage in their career, even Leonard Floyd, more than just like a third down pass rush type role, right? I know that's like Leonard Floyd's kind of thing, but he's played early downs. AJ Epenesa's playing like those guys are more valuable from a snap share and snap count perspective too. So it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for Bills fans one way or another. But I do agree that it's probably likely that it's going to cost the Bills being able to re-sign Epinesa and Floyd. And Roy says could come down to Epinesa or Floyd. At this point, if the Bills are even able to bring one of those guys back, I would consider it a big win.
Yeah, I mean, to me, maybe you can get Epinesa back, right? And then next year, again, if the Von Miller situation, I cannot state this enough, somehow resolves itself and he's able to play on the football field again, it would be Von Miller. Your fingers crossed, hope he can give you the pop that Leonard Floyd did. And then you have Rousseau, and then you have Epinesa, who you've extended, and you can pretty much run back what you had this year with Von Miller, hopefully replacing that Leonard Floyd production 2 years removed from his injury. But you can also look at the situation as this: if the Von Miller situation gets to a certain point where he is suspended by the National Football League, the Buffalo Bills can void that money. And I think a long-term future without Von Miller, if the Bills are able to void those guarantees, I think a lot of that money could be funneled in the direction of bringing Leonard Floyd back and maybe reteaming Leonard Floyd with Gregory Rousseau as our bookends in 2024. That is if the Buffalo Bills can get out of Von Miller's contract. But if they cannot, they're just going to have to cross their fingers and hope Von Miller can recreate what Leonard Floyd did 2 years removed from that surgery.
Yeah, and that puts the clock on right, because we're in December now. Free agency is going to be sometime in mid-March, late-ish March, and so you're talking about the legal process, or a majority of the legal process, to where the point where the NFL potentially hands down a suspension would have to play out within the next 3, maybe 4 months, right? And that's, I think, to me, and again, I don't know how this is going to play out. That seems quick to me, and I'm not sure the legal aspect of that is going to play out that quickly. But who knows? We don't know.
Let's take a look now ahead to 2024 a little bit, because like I said, I've been doing a little peeking ahead with the bye week this week. I mean, you've used it to analyze the AFC landscape. I've been using it to like start my draft prep, look at the Buffalo Bills roster, all those different things. So I want to run a couple of things by you, and I want to sort of just go position group by position group for a little bit here and talk about maybe where the Buffalo Bills future lies and look at the skeleton of this roster heading into the offseason. Now, this season is not over yet, but hey, with the late bye week, we don't really need to do the whole like MVP, most improved player type of superlatives for the Buffalo Bills like we maybe would do if it was more towards the middle of the season. So looking at the Buffalo Bills offensive skill positions next year, man, like the talent, the top end talent is going to be there for the Buffalo Bills, but the depth is going to be completely washed from this football team over the course of the offseason. When you look at the Buffalo Bills offensive skill positions coming back next year, you have just Josh Allen at quarterback. You have just James Cook at running back. You have Reggie Gilliam. Then you have Stefon Diggs, Khalil Shakir, and Justin Shorter. Those are only 3 real wide receivers other than Shavers and Thompson coming back next year. And then at tight end, you have Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox coming back next year. There's a lot of talent. Obviously, Josh Allen is a franchise quarterback, one of the NFL's elite. James Cook is a very good running back. Diggs is an alpha wide receiver. Shakir has shown a lot of flash. Kincaid, the sky is the limit with him. Dawson Knox is going to be a really fun TE2. But Gabriel Davis likely gone. Deontay Hardy and Naheem Hines, in my opinion, probably going to be cap-related releases. That leaves huge holes for the Buffalo Bills at running back depth and wide receiver heading into the offseason. And I'm already starting the campaign. The Buffalo Bills need to take a wide receiver in the first round of the NFL draft.
Yeah, it's going to, like, to me, one of the 2 big interesting things, I guess, with the current roster that I think will, outside of Gabe Davis, right, and whether or not he'll be re-signed, which I just, it seems unlikely at this point, is the guys that are under contract. 2 guys you mentioned, Naheem Hines and Deontay Hardy, who are under contract, both over $5 million cap hits next year should they stay on the team. And I don't know, maybe Deontay Hardy is forced into at least a summer role or a camp role if the Bills feel like they just don't have the bodies. I envision that he could potentially be a casualty maybe after the draft or after free agency. I'm not sure what order of operations, like what will happen with a guy like Deontay Hardy, but he's certainly not a guy that the Bills have really utilized in the offense this year. And I know it's only been 2 weeks with Joe Brady, but like he just really hasn't been utilized in the way that a guy with that type of cap hit you would expect. And look, I know there are a lot of mouths to feed this year, and maybe there's more of a plan for him for 2024, but like that's really hard to say with any certainty.
Yeah.
And then Nyheim Hines coming back off the injury, the accident, obviously, but again, with running backs on the roster only being James Cook at Reggie Gilliam aside, like, do the Bills say, yeah, we are actually going to bring Nyheim Hines back under his current cap number and sort of have him in tow? So to me, outside of the Gabriel Davis situation, which will play itself out and maybe is the most of interest to Bills fans, those two guys, Hines and Hardy, are big shoes that will need to drop right in the offseason. So
in my opinion, the second the Buffalo Bills have a chance, I think both of these guys are going to be released. I don't even think it's like a wait till after the draft situation. I mean, think about it. This is a team that's going to be up against the cap next year. Greg Tomset did a great job on the Greg Tomset Sports Show last week of breaking down how the Buffalo Bills can save a lot of money. But Deontay Hardy's cap hit's going to be almost $5.5 million next season. If you release him, it's a $1.3 million dead cap and $4 million in cap savings.
Yeah.
Nyheim Hines to be the backup or third string running back next year would cost the Buffalo Bills $5.5 million. If they release him, it's a $500,000 dead cap and a $5 million in savings.
Yeah.
So you're saving $9 million cutting Deontay Hardy and Nyheim Hines. Now, these are the guys who have been your go-to return men the past 2 seasons. You had big, bold plans for both of these two, and they just haven't lived up. But if you're the Buffalo Bills, I think from a money standpoint, like you just got to at this point cut bait on both of those guys. And speaking of cutting bait, like I said, it's the bye week. So on social media, I've been posting a lot of, hey, here's what the Buffalo Bills have coming back in 2024. Here's what the Buffalo Bills offense could look like in 24. I've been doing those kind of prognosticating posts. And I swear, the number one comment I get on every single offensive post is cut Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox is a bum. Trade Dawson Knox for whatever you can get. I don't think people realize that Dawson Knox will be a member of the Buffalo Bills in 2024. In 2024. There's legitimately a 0% chance he will not be a Buffalo Bill. If you release Dawson Knox from his contract before June 1st, it is a $20 million dead cap hit. If you trade Dawson Knox before June 1st, it is a $12 million cap hit in 2024, $12.5 million, and an $8 million cap hit in 2025. It's not going to happen. We'll just wait until after June. No, because you can't spend that money until after June 1st anyway. And who's going to be around after June 1st? Like, dude, he is going to be a Buffalo Bill in 2024. He is going to be TE2. The Bills are going to have 12 personnel sets. The Bills are going to involve him in the offense. I don't think it'll take away from Dalton Kincaid, and I think everything will be just fine. I look forward to Dawson Knox coming back. I hope he plays in the Kansas City game. Like, I really do think he could add a layer to this offense. I know people are afraid of what's going to happen with Dalton Kincaid when he comes back, but to me, I'm not the least bit concerned. You can get out of this contract in 2025. Just accept that he's going to be on the roster and just look forward to the various different ways the Buffalo Bills can use him, and just maybe have an appreciation for all the different hats that he wears.
Yeah, I'll be appreciative when he comes back. I think just by the conversation we had 2-3 minutes ago, guys like Hardy, Sherfield, Gabe Davis potentially not being back. Like, you don't want to just cut a guy just to cut him, not to mention the cap ramifications, right? It doesn't make sense. Like, you're worried about what that means for Dalton Kincaid. I really wouldn't worry too much about that, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he's coming back as one of your, I want to call it primary weapons, but one of your top tier talent on the offensive side of the ball, skill position wise, in a situation where you're going to be pretty thin, right? So why make it more thin? It doesn't make any sense. You're talking about Cook, Diggs, Kincaid, Knox, like he's going to be one of the top 3, potentially one of the top 3 to 4 options going into the offseason that's on the roster. And also Walter comes in and says, I don't get the Knox hate. He might be overpaid as people believe if you look at his salary versus peers, but or not as overpaid as people believe if you look at his salary versus peers. And if you think about what the Bills are paying the tight end position right now, it's kind of like the comparison that people were making between like maybe like guys like Elam and Benford, right? It's like maybe not so much on the money, but like collectively at the tight end room, like you're in a really good position right now for the Bills. And like this is a room that you've tried to figure out for years and years. And like the Bills really before Dawson Knox came on had been one of the worst tight end teams for 20 years, I'll say. And now they could be one of the best. So let's be happy with what we've got with Kincaid and Knox, right? And I hope he's back as well, by the way, for the Chiefs game.
Taking a look at the skeleton of the Buffalo Bills offensive line, they're pretty much bringing back everybody but David Edwards. Deion Dawkins is back. Spencer Brown is back. Ryan Vandermark is under contract. Mitch Morse, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, Ryan Bates, Alec Anderson, all under contract for 2024. So that bodes well for the Buffalo Bills. Now, 2025 is where it gets scary and where when you want to add guys to the roster, you have to think about maybe 2 years ahead because Deion Dawkins is going into the final year of his contract. Spencer Brown is going into the final year of his contract. And Mitch Morse is going into the final year of his contract. So I really like some of the pieces. Spencer Brown has turned out to be a very good right tackle. Connor McGovern, a very good left guard. Osiris Torrance, a very good right guard. The Buffalo Bills have some fun, young pieces along that offensive line to go with the elder statesmen in Deion Dawkins and Mitch Morse.
Yeah, like I don't even want to think about 2025 right now for that group. But yeah, I mean it's shaping up for maybe one of the few off seasons we've had in recent, well, probably the only off season maybe you and I have had together doing a show where like the offensive line maybe isn't going to be a huge concern going into particularly the 2024 standalone, but. Yeah, Bill's in decent shape with the offensive line, and honestly, all the analytics and advanced stats and all this stuff for this year for the Bills offensive line has shown a pretty positive light on that group. So, if David Edwards is really your only quote key departure, like Bills are in nice shape, and it's important, right? Because there will be limited resources to go around. It will be nice for the Bills not have to worry about this group technically next year. Now, beyond that, what to do with Deion Dawkins, Mitch Morse, etc. 2025. I'm not even going to let my head wander there yet, but at least for next year, good shape for sure.
Charles G comes in and says, extend Deion and Morse. Bills Are Electric comes in and says, please draft a center in the 3rd round this year. I'll tell you what, Bills Are Electric, my early impressions of this year's center class, not great. So the Buffalo Bills looking for a center, probably not the year to be looking for a center. Last year, we were oohing and eyeing over 7 or 8 different centers, like all the way from our guy, John Michael Schmidt, early to a guy I loved late in John Gaines, who had a season-ending injury, but was killing it with the Arizona Cardinals in the preseason. Like there was just a dearth of centers that we loved in this draft. It's not going to be the case, I think, in the 2024 draft, but it's still early. Speaking of center, though, again, one of the things that I put out there on social media this week, if the Buffalo Bills are looking to free up money, the Buffalo Bills are looking to go big game hunting, if the Buffalo Bills are looking to bring back Leonard Floyd, if the Buffalo Bills are looking to add an alpha number 2 receiver, chase a T. Higgins, that's not going to happen, but like trade for a Mike Evans, right? Like all these things that certain people in Bills Mafia want to do. Mitch Morse is a $3 million dead cap hit, but an $8.5 million savings. The Buffalo Bills are paying Ryan Bates a heck of a lot of money to be a backup. Could you envision a scenario in which the Buffalo Bills release Mitch Morse to save that $8.5 million, and they roll out Ryan Bates as their starting center next season?
I think it's possible. I think a lot will depend on if obvious moves like cutting Naheem Hines, Deontay Hardy, etc. happen, and if the
Mhm.
Bills, maybe the Von Miller situation has a role in this, right? Maybe
Yeah.
the Von Miller situation, if all this plays out and looks like he's going to be back and there's not going to be any issue, like who knows?
Or they
Maybe
have to
that,
or they have to cut him and eat all that money, and they gotta
yeah,
save money everywhere, right? Like, that's
right,
another
right.
situation too.
Yeah, so it's a wild card,
Mhm.
Mitch Morse, right, for next year. Although my my heart wants him back for another year. I feel like we end up getting into these factions of opinion
Mhm.
where there's a lot of people out there who maybe love Mitch Morse. There's a lot of people maybe think he's overrated. Like he's a somewhat polarizing figure that maybe we don't talk
Mhm.
about. Like we don't really talk about him that much because we appreciate his play, but the cap savings is real for him, right? This is not a Dawson Knox
Mhm.
scenario. This is not one of those where like you can't get out. Like very well could get out of this contract if
Mhm.
the Bills felt that way. However, I would say like if you do have Mitch Morse and he is back for one more year and he's still playing at a high level and he's been injury free, as we know this year he's been injury free, then you probably do want to give him
Mhm.
one more run with Josh Allen as that battery for 2024. So my my view, I guess, is it depends on sort of what happens elsewhere on the roster, but like my heart wants him back
Yeah.
for one more year.
And Charles G says, sorry. He it's a great comment. We've been incredibly fortunate with an O-line healthy. Bates is exactly what I want in a backup. But there was a comment from Bills Are Electric. Can Alec Anderson or someone play center? The Bills played Alec Anderson at some center this preseason, right? And I think the Buffalo Bills envision Alec Anderson as being a guy who can play center, who can play guard, etc. I wouldn't be surprised if they're grooming a guy like Alec Anderson to be a backup center to a Ryan Bates, should Ryan Bates enter the starting lineup. And then RJ Valville saying, hey, maybe Mitch Morse takes a pay cut for 2024 as well. So a number of different options for the Buffalo Bills, but it's just something to think about. And we'll talk about it more as the offseason progresses and or as we get to the offseason. I shouldn't say as the offseason progresses, as we get to the offseason, because we still got 5 weeks plus, hopefully, fingers crossed, the playoffs to talk about. But the Buffalo Bills defensive line is a completely different story. Obviously, there's the Von Miller situation. We're not going to talk about that, but he's under contract for next season. You have Gregory Rousseau and Kingsley Jonathan on the edge under contract for next season. And then on the interior, it is quite simply just Ed Oliver. So the Buffalo Bills literally have 4 of their 10 or so defensive linemen under contract for next year. Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, Shaq Lawson, Poona Ford, Linval Joseph, Leonard Floyd, AJ Epinesa, all unrestricted free agents. The Buffalo Bills could be seeing once again a massive overhaul at this position. And the way they address it, the way they address defensive line, the way they're going to address safety, and the way they address wide receiver is probably going to determine just how good the Buffalo Bills are going to be in 2024.
Yeah, and I think this is a group where you start to look down the guys that are UFAs. Like I would try to bring back Linval Joseph. I would try to
Mhm.
bring him back. I would give Daquan Jones, again, assuming he's back to full
Mhm.
health. And looks like whether or not he comes back this year is, indeterminate, but it
Mhm.
certainly sounds like this is not something that's going to be a long-term
Mhm.
issue for him. I would make it a priority to try to bring Daquan Jones back on another 1 or 2 year deal, and you can start to maybe piece this line back together with some of the guys you already have. I wouldn't have any hesitation just letting Jordan Phillips walk. I wouldn't bring him back.
Mhm.
I probably wouldn't bring Poona Ford back at this point. But there are guys that you can probably bring back on pretty minimal deals.
Mhm.
Shaq Lawson, Linval Joseph, give Daquan Jones maybe the same 2-year contract you gave him
Mhm.
previously, and you can start to piece this line back together. I don't think Tim Settle will be back, but there will be holes to fill, right, on this defensive line. And I do think that if you can start to piece it back together a little bit with some of the guys you already have,
Mhm.
then it makes it a little more palatable to kind of head into the draft or even head into the bulk of free agency with some of those guys signed. But purely from a numbers standpoint, the Bills have to do something here, right? Because they can't go into
Mhm.
I would imagine they can't even go into like proper free agency with only 4 guys. I would imagine they're
Yeah.
going to try to re-sign
Yeah.
a couple of these guys
Mhm.
before the proper free agency period begins. So, yeah,
Mhm.
a unit that we had high hopes for 2023 and potentially still could have a strong finish to 2023, but big
Mhm.
question marks once again. Not a unit that could look a totally different from year to year with this team in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, to me, in my opinion, Daquan Jones is priority number 1 this offseason for the Buffalo Bills. He's
Yep.
priority number 1 for me because we see how dominant Ed Oliver can be next to him. We saw how he was an all-pro, practically an all-pro player when he was healthy. I mean, he was just a force on that defensive line for the Buffalo Bills. He would be priority number 1 for me, getting him extended long-term, maybe 2-3 years to keep him along the defensive line, maybe make it something that's easier to get out of as he gets older because he is on the other side of 30. But you mentioned like not wanting to go into proper free agency with it is how it is. I'm ready to be done with Jordan Phillips and I'm ready to be done with Shaq Lawson. I am. Like I'm ready to be done with both those guys. But at the same time, when you're the Buffalo Bills and you're going to be in a salary cap situation like you're in, and guys like Jordan Phillips and guys like Shaq Lawson have made plays for you and pretty much have made plays for no one else. They just can only make plays for you for some reason. That drives down their market value to a point where like they literally can only sign for you if they want to be relevant. And they're just going to have to take whatever you pretty much offer them. That's as much as I don't want them back as much as I'm ready to move on. If you're Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, like that's going to be hard to turn down, right? Because say you re-sign Daquan Jones and you have Ed Oliver, you now need to replace your backup 3 tech and your backup 1 tech. So you have a decision to make. Well, we're going to draft a 1 tech this year. Okay, cool. You're going to draft a 3 tech too, and you're going to have 2 rookie backups.
Mm-hmm.
It takes defensive tackles a year or 2 usually to really hit their stride in the National Football League. You want 2 rookies when you rotate your defensive line the way the Buffalo Bills do. So I get wanting to get younger. I do, but it's probably pretty tempting to have Ed Oliver at 1 3 tech and then Jordan Phillips coming in behind him with Daquan Jones at 1 tech and a rookie behind Daquan Jones. Or you can flip it sort of, or you could flip it sort of vice versa, right? Like if you want the rookie in your 3 tech behind Ed Oliver, well, then you need to back up 1 tech. Jordan Phillips would be gone in that situation because I think he's proven that he really can't do the 1 tech stuff for us. But then you're going to have to go out into veteran free agency and you're going to have to find a player to be the backup 1 tech. Maybe that is Linval Joseph. Maybe he's got another year left in him, right? But it's going to have to be something cost effective. And can a cost effective 1 tech give you as much as a cost effective Jordan Phillips? I don't know. And Charles G comes in and says, hey, maybe it's finally Ilianku's chance to shine. So that'll be really interesting for the Buffalo Bills. And then same with Shaq Lawson, right? Like if Epinesa and if Epinesa and Floyd leave and you're stuck with Miller, Rousseau, and Kingsley Jonathan, you're going to want Shaq Lawson there just as a wave depth training camp competition guy, just because you just need to hold on, right? Like who knows? Can we get someone in free agency? How does the draft board fall? Like you're going to want a fail safe, a guy who, in Shaq Lawson there. So again, as much as I want to be done with those 2 guys, it might not be that time. Linebacker is pretty simple. Tyrell Dodson's a free agent. AJ Klein is a free agent. Milano Bernard, Williams, Spector. That is the Buffalo Bills present and the Buffalo Bills future at linebacker. I wouldn't be surprised if Tyrell Dodson gets some money elsewhere and leaves, and the Buffalo Bills add either some street free agent or late round draft pick to slot behind Balon Spector. Obviously, Tyler Medikevich is probably going to be gone as well. So on to the secondary, where again, it gets pretty tricky for the Buffalo Bills. At corner, Trey White. What do we do with Trey White? Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam. The question marks surrounding Kyer Elam. You got Jamarcus Ingram. Obviously, you got Teron Johnson, Saran Neal locked up. The whole safety group. Cam Lewis is a free agent. Micah Hyde is a free agent. And Tyler Rapp is a free agent. So really, it's just Jordan Poyer and DeMar Hamlin. So a lot of shakeups for the Buffalo Bills in the secondary Let's start with Trey White because 2 years, 2 pretty serious lower leg injuries. His post June 1st release, and it pains me to say it, saves you $10 million on the salary cap. It's a $6 million dead cap hit in 2024. It's a $4 million dead cap hit in 2025. I think Dane Jackson's a free agent. I think if you're the Buffalo Bills, I think you got to say goodbye. I don't know if you can afford another rehab, another working your way back, another ramping up, another, is he going to get back to the form he used to be? I don't know if you're the Buffalo Bills, you can afford that. Like, as Shabroni comes in, like, Trey sadly probably might be done as a Buffalo Bill.
And the tough part about it is it's not like this is like both injuries, right, have been like very significant lower like leg injuries, right? And so we know how difficult it was for Trey coming back from the ACL, not just the physical aspects, which is obviously difficult, but the mental aspect as well. You know, he admittedly contemplated like not coming back during the COVID situation. So like this is something where one wouldn't be surprised maybe if he himself wasn't even wanting to come back and play again, right? But then the Bills organizationally then have to decide whether or not if Trey does have intentions of coming back, like can they afford to sit around and wait around for that recovery? Because at this point, there is no guarantee again that he would even be ready for the start of, let's say, training camp or the season. We just don't know, right? And again, like, would he? What left would he have in the tank? There is the possibility that maybe if the Bills envision Trey White maybe potentially changing positions and moving to safety, is that something that could be considered? Like the Bills, one thing I will say about like us and really a lot of people in like fans, content creation, whatever, like we have talked a lot about the secondary over the years and guys being like changing positions, right? We talked about this with Christian Benford when he was first drafted. We talked about this with other guys that we've had on the roster in the past, like moving to safety. And the fact is the Bills really haven't ever done that with anybody in Sean McDermott's tenure, at least since having guys on their roster. Now I know guys like Micah Hyde earlier in their careers played corner and moved to safety, and Jordan Poyer, same. But when the Bills have had guys on the roster, they've really generally stuck to the same position that they've had them at. So I don't know what the future holds for Trey White, but it's another tough decision for the Bills.
And the thing is too, so you move Trey White to free safety, right, to fill the Micah Hyde slot. How much of training camp is he getting at a new position?
Right.
How much of OTAs is he getting in a new position? Coming off of 2 leg injuries, are you paying a free safety who's never played free safety before $16.5 million cap hit, right? Like, that's why I just trust me. Listen, I love Trey. You love Trey. We all love Trey. As much as we love Trey, the people inside this organization probably love him 1,000 times more. Like, I just cannot envision a realistic scenario in which he is a Buffalo Bill in 2024, unless I just have a brazen misunderstanding of how contract works and he can rip his up and take a massive pay cut. I just don't see it. And that leaves us with Christian Benford on one side, and it leaves us with Rasul Douglas on the other side. The thing about Rasul Douglas is he's got a $9 million cap hit in 2024. He's under contract. None of it is guaranteed. So if you release Rasul Douglas, you recoup $9 million and eat zero, right? It's a $9 million cap savings. So if he falls off a cliff the second half of this year, we can cut him, right? We can make the decision to move on from Rasul Douglas and hope he signs elsewhere for big money and we recoup a compensatory draft pick. I think that might be something the Buffalo Bills can do. Whether he was on the Bills roster long enough to do that, I don't know. I'd also have to look into that as well. But to me, Rasul Douglas is an easy restructure extension candidate because I think the Buffalo Bills are going to want to lower that cap hit. They're going to want to and they're going to want to extend him probably for a couple more years. So I think I envision a scenario. Every scenario I envision, it's Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford on the boundary for the Buffalo Bills to start next season, and it's Kyer Elam as the first CB off the bench.
I think Douglas is a perfect fail-safe type of situation for the Bills. Like, again, we've talked about every position group at this point, and there are a lot of questions, maybe outside of offensive line. There are questions at every position group outside of maybe offensive line and linebacker, right?
Yep.
And like, other than those two positions, like, you're going to need to fill
massive turnover.
holes. So to me, like, let's avoid one of those holes. Let's give Rasul Douglas an extension, lower that cap number for 2024. You can still realize a savings because it's a $9 million cap hit. But if you give him that extension, you can push some of that cap hit out. Like, it makes perfect sense to me to give him an extension.
I do not think people really have a thorough understanding yet, and I think they will, of how different this Buffalo Bills roster is going to look next year. I mean, I look at all the draft picks that Brandon Beane accumulated too, and I know he traded one for Rasul Douglas. He had to. I think we're looking at a 2022 Chiefs-esque reset, right? Like, I think the Buffalo Bills are looking at that and they're staring that in the face in 2024, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they approach that 2024 the 2024 reset. Do they go all in free agency on one side and all in on the draft on the other, like the Chiefs did? Because, I mean, if you look at the Chiefs, right, in 2022, they added Juju Smith-Schuster, they added Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They went all in on giving Patrick Mahomes weapons to replace Tyreek Hill, veteran weapons. And then they pretty much drafted all defense except for Sky Moore with their early picks. Like, 6 of their first 7 picks or 5 of their first 6 picks were defensive players. The only one who wasn't was Sky Moore. Do the Buffalo Bills take that approach, right? Like, everyone wants a first one wide receiver. Maybe the Buffalo Bills this offseason go out and add 2 veteran wide receivers to go along with Khalil Shakir and Stefon Diggs, and they, keep Ty Johnson at running back and go find another Latavius Murray, Leonard Fournette type and just run this offense back with some veterans and then draft 10 defenders. Like literally just draft 10 defenders and just retool this entire defense. The other part of me thinks, like, no way in hell Sean McDermott does that because he barely wants to play young players on his defense, like, just ever. So part of me thinks maybe it's the other way. Maybe the Buffalo Bills go out and they look for their veterans on defense, but their defense just has so many holes. I can't imagine them plugging it all with veterans and then drafting and going young on offense. Or maybe they try to take a more balanced approach. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Buffalo Bills approach the 2024 offseason. There's a number of different ways in which they can go. And again, if you're looking to save money,
you draft your wide receiver in the first round, then go defense the rest of the draft. There you go.
Or I'm starting so I want a wide receiver in the first round so bad. Everyone knows I want a wide receiver in the first round so bad. I've made that point clear, but I'm envisioning a world where I get my receiver in the second round. Like, I think the Buffalo Bills are going to go safety or defensive tackle in the first round. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I really don't even know if there's any defensive tackles outside of Newton really worthy of a first round pick, though. There are some safeties. That the Buffalo Bills will be intrigued with. There are some edge rushers that the Buffalo Bills will be intrigued with based on where they're projected to select in this year's draft. And that could change drastically over the next 5 weeks where they're projected to select. Last but not least here, Jordan Poyer, $2 million dead cap hit if you release him, $5.5 million savings. It'll be interesting to see if the Buffalo Bills go for a hard reset at safety or they just have Jordan Poyer stick around one more year while they work in a new free safety, because I find it hard to believe that both Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer will be back, both roaming center field for the Buffalo Bills in 2024, with Hyde obviously being the unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, it just seems like the number is manageable for Poyer, right? And like, it depends, I think, on what the Bills are able to do, I think, in free agency, right? Because again, you mentioned, and I was going to say, like, the holes on the defensive side of the ball are numerous. Yes, you're losing potentially Gabe Davis, and you're going to be thin at wide receiver. However, like, guys like Ty Johnson, for example, probably could be brought back for cheap, right? There are receivers that you can bring back for cheap to fill the holes. And ultimately, unless you envision like adding another weapon, a high-end weapon in the draft, like, your offensive skill position, top end wise, is in decent shape, right? The depth is an issue. I get that. Top end, you're in decent shape. Defensively, your top end and your depth is potentially in rough shape, right? So outside of like linebacker, right? So defensive line and secondary both going to have massive holes, not just to depth, but to starters, right? So you that's where I would tend to lean towards like let's just have Poyer back for the rest of his
Yeah,
contract, right?
I
And
I would
so
agree.
yeah.
Looking at it again, I really do believe the Buffalo Bills are in for a hard reset in 2024. I think you're going to see a drastic roster overhaul, and the decisions that they make at wide receiver, along the defensive line, both at edge rusher and on the interior, across from and behind Ed Oliver, and at safety are going to make or break the Buffalo Bills 2024 season. Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have some decisions to make, with the Bills having some glaring needs at these three spots, and these three spots are going to be vital and the talking points of this Buffalo Bills offseason. All right. Before we close out the show, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it is just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. All right, Dave. There's a couple of pretty funny AFC East storylines that I want to get to before we head out of here. And then if there's anything else you want to talk about, we can talk about that as well. First is the Jets. There was a report from Diana Rossini of The Athletic today, and it was an absolute doozy. If you have not seen this report from The Athletic, please go find the original tweet from Diana Rossini and go just look at the QTs, like just all of the funny memes and videos that have been shared. Here is the tweet from Diana Rossini, who's now at The Athletic, no longer at ESPN. The Jets want to make a switch at quarterback. The team is leaning towards Zach Wilson to take over, but he is reluctant to step back in. The team is discussing next steps. Yes, Bills are electric. And Zach Wilson has entered the transfer portal. I think probably my favorite line of the day was Zach Wilson, for the first time in his life, is refusing when a 40-year-old is telling him to put it to go back in.
Oh my God, I hadn't seen that. That's perfect.
So
my goodness.
what do you make of this Zach Wilson story? Like, the Jets have absolutely bent the knee to Aaron Rodgers. That's what happens when you miss on 2 quarterbacks in the top 5 of the NFL draft, and the repercussions are just hilarious, and they're just absolutely devastating to those who are fans of the New York Jets.
Look, Zach Wilson to me doesn't really come across as a guy who mentally like always has his wits about him. Like I feel like he's improved, I think, from the beginning of the season to now, obviously, and like sort of taking accountability and things like that. But like he really got thrown into the fire in that New York media. This is probably one of the smartest things I think I've heard come out of his mouth. Because you would think like a guy like Zach Wilson, who's been benched, the number 2 overall pick, would be just, hey, I need to get back in some way or another. But like for the future of his career and like where's the like what is the benefit, I guess, of him going back in now? Like I still think it's probably a little bit odd to say like, yeah, I'm not gonna play, like for a guy who hasn't really proven himself yet, but also like that Jets offensive line is historically bad, and like I
guess
just think it's funny.
Well, I guess then there was a further report that I saw right before we started the show, and it stated Zach Wilson is okay with being the Jets starting quarterback again. He just wants to be asked directly. So that like shows maybe the dysfunction of the New York Jets. Like they're just like trying to like get Zach Wilson to be the starting quarterback again without having a conversation with him. Like that's also seems very weirdly odd and dysfunctional. And man, there was a video last week. Did you see the video of Aaron Rodgers throwing the football, like throwing that bomb?
Yeah.
coming off of his
Yep.
torn Achilles. Did you happen to see Todd Downing in the background of that video?
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay,
He was
like just
cheesing.
the shit eating grin on his face. And that just like goes to show you like that video right there was the New York Jets summarized in a nutshell. Like Todd Downing was just happy to be there. He
Oh
was
yeah.
just happy to ride Aaron Rodgers' coattails, just like everyone in that organization is just happy to be riding Aaron Rodgers' coattails. The way that people spoke about Aaron Rodgers on Hard Knocks, and I get that there were cameras in front of them and they were maybe trying to put on a show. The way Robert Saleh talked about him, the way Jeff Ulbrich talked about him, the way Nathaniel Hackett, Todd Downing, the other players, Woody Johnson, the way people talked about and just the way they kissed Aaron Rodgers' feet, that's not healthy for any organization. I don't care who the player is, let alone an almost 40-year-old quarterback who's a fucking nut job, right? Like, look at the Green Bay Packers last night. Jordan Love chucking the ball all over the field to so many young, fun receivers. And one of my buddies who's a Packers fan just tweeted out, he's like, hey, how nice is it to not have your young wide receivers stunted by having Randall Cobb out there in a walker, having him playing the slot, right? Like, that just goes to show you the dysfunction of the New York Jets for bending the knee to Aaron Rodgers. Like, I kind of feel bad for Jets fans, and Woody Johnson's going to keep them all. Apparently, the report is Robert Saleh is safe, Joe Douglas is safe, Nathaniel Hackett is safe, Aaron Rodgers is coming back, and they'll be A-okay. I don't think Aaron Rodgers solves the problems that they have in that organization. I think you gotta clean house if you're Woody Johnson, but hey, teach their
not
own.
to mention that offensive line is
Mhm.
like I don't even know. Like I would not want to play quarterback behind that offensive line.
Yeah.
Like Aaron Rodgers coming off of the whatever you think about his injury, like he's not going to be as effective behind that offensive line either. He had a
Yeah.
pretty good offensive line for most of his run in Green Bay, and this
Mhm.
offensive line is brutally bad. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I kind of do a little bit feel bad for the Jets,
Mhm.
but really not. It's hard to feel bad for another AFC East team.
The Patriots lost 6-0 to the Chargers. They are 1000% tanking. I saw some other statistic. They're like the first team, like in NFL history, or the first team since like 1934 to hold opponents to under like 10 points or 10 points or fewer in 3 straight weeks and not win. Like I saw some crazy stat like that. I mean, how to ruin careers 101. I feel bad for Mac Jones. Like, is that weird to say? Like, I kind of feel bad
Yeah,
for Mac
I don't.
Jones.
I don't. He's
The
not
way
likable to me, so
the
I don't
way
feel
they've been,
bad for him.
yeah, but the way they've been just running that organization, that quarterback this year has been hilarious. I thought Bill O'Brien would fix a lot of the problems and he would be an adult in the room, but what this year is going to show is that the Patriot way is absolutely nothing without Tom Brady. That culture that Bill Belichick fostered in New England, it was a culture. It's a culture of despair. I mean, like they literally, players just seem miserable to be there. Like they don't seem to enjoy being there. Rookies go there and fail miserably, like just fall flat on their face because they're not really even given an opportunity to launch by that organization. You look at the New England Patriots, and again, as a Bills fan, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. But the vibe I'm getting is when Bill Belichick steps away, Gerard Mayo becomes the head coach. One of their front office guys probably is in line to take on the role of general manager. If you're Robert Kraft, don't do it. Don't. I wouldn't. If I was Robert Kraft, I would fire every single person who's ever come into contact with Bill Belichick. I would. I would fire the ball boys. I would fire the security guards. I would fire the secretaries. I would fire every coach on that coaching staff. I would fire every scout. I would fire every front office personnel member. I would legitimately fire every single person in that building. And I would 1000% wipe the place absolutely clean of anything remotely Bill Belichick. I think a hard reset is needed in New England.
I think a hard reset is needed, and I'm hoping that they don't do it. And,
Yeah.
and
No, please don't. Please don't.
Yeah. I will say,
Can you imagine bringing Bill Belichick back next year, and having Bill Belichick coach a football team with Caleb Williams as the quarterback? Could you imagine that marriage?
I think Caleb Williams might cry the first day of practice.
I think Caleb Williams might go back to USC.
The
Going from
interesting
Lincoln
thing,
Riley to Bill Belichick is just so funny.
the whole phrase like
Mhm.
winning cures everything was like so much like the mask over this organization, right, for so long, because like
Mhm.
they were winning and it was like they were winning and it was the Patriot way and it was this and that, and it's like Bill Belichick's smarter than everybody else in the room, but like if you look
Mhm.
at it, like he is a historically bad drafter. Like their drafts have been very bad overall for the better part of the last 10, 15 years. And I know not everybody hits in the draft, but like their drafts have been bad. They can't draft wide
Mhm.
receivers. We know that. They've been able to draft a couple good defensive players here and there.
Can't draft
Fine.
quarterbacks
They can't draft. Well, yeah, they can't draft quarterbacks. Like
after Tom
again,
Brady.
right? And
Only one in like 5 of their running backs pan out.
and like the one quarterback that was semi decent that they did draft is now kind of washed, right? In Jimmy G. So,
Mhm.
I hope they just stay in this kind of purgatory for a while. They need to
Yeah.
be at the bottom for a while.
100%. Yeah. And there was this tweet that went viral about how tickets were going for like $6 in New England and Foxborough, to like how the mighty have fallen. Tickets are $6 in Foxborough. Like there's nothing, like it was like, how embarrassing. And there's nothing embarrassing about it. Any NFL team in the month of December in a cold weather city, when the team is downright awful, literally can't score a point, and is not going to win the football games, no one's going to want to go watch that shit. No one. If the roles were reversed and that was the Bills, fans would just be there to get drunk, and they probably wouldn't even make their way into the stadium. Like, it's just like there was nothing embarrassing about it. But I always use this opportunity to tell my favorite story of all time. I went to Foxborough a decade plus ago now, and it was the Otis McKelvin fumble game. I don't know if you remember that game, but I was there.
Yeah,
I was there. I got to enjoy that one in person. But we were having a conversation with the Patriots season ticket holder. I went with a bunch of buddies and stuff and family, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I can describe any Patriots fan in Gillette Stadium in one sentence for you. And we're like, do it. He goes, not rich enough to afford Red Sox tickets. That's how he described Patriots fans in Gillette Stadiums. The only reason people are here is because they can't afford Red Sox tickets. That's what the New England Patriots are to the say New England, winning or losing. So that is a funny story from my time in Gillette. All right. Any final words, talking points, topics, segments, etc. before we head out of here? Anything you want to talk about?
No, I think we'll start our prep for this Chiefs game, and I guess we'll probably do our pregame 9 a.m. ish on Sunday off the bye, and we'll see if the Bills make any news with Dawson Knox tomorrow and opening up his 21-day window. So that'll be something to pay attention to.
Yeah, a lot of things to pay attention to this week, from the Buffalo Bills returning from their bye week, a lot of different press conferences, the Von Miller situation, the Dawson Knox situation. So a lot to talk about, and we will be back Sunday at 9 a.m. for our Bills Chiefs pregame. Don't forget, all the Cover One shows live this week, and Eric just dropped a great video on option routes in lieu of last week's game, so you can go ahead and check that out once you are done with this show. And as always, you can help us out in a number of ways. Number one, you can smash that like button. And number two, outside of the comment section here during the live stream, if you could so please, we would really appreciate it. Once this video ends, leave a comment on the video. Really anything. It can be a compliment. It can be a criticism. Thoughts on the Bills' playoff hopes. Thoughts on the Buffalo Bills 2024 forecast. You name it. Leave a comment in the comment section. It really helps us here with the algorithm and getting ourselves in front of more eyeballs. And as always, thank you so much, guys in the chat. You guys you're the third host of this show. You make our show what it is. We would just be two dudes talking football for like 30 to 45 minutes every week if it wasn't for you guys in the comment section. You keep us going an hour and a half every week. So thank you guys so much. And until next time, go
Thank
Bills.
you for watching tonight.
No, sorry. I hit the button too soon. I have just been
Go
full
Bills.
of errors, a comedy of errors today on my part. So for anyone watching now, going back to rewatch top of the show, just skip the first 10 minutes because my audio was awful. And then I messed up a promo, and now I just messed up the outro. So one more time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!